In this video, I'm going to show you my favorite stretches for hip and low back pain when happening together. Hey everyone, I'm Sebastian at Performance Place Sports Care, part of the locally world famous chiropractors in Costa Mesa, California. Now sometimes many of you will be experiencing only low back pain or only hip pain, but a lot of you may find out that they actually feel like they're combined. They feel like they're the same thing. They come on at the same time, they decrease at the same rate. And although you may notice that time to time they separate, generally they feel kind of the same thing. Most of you who will have this feeling tend to notice that it's actually the low back into this region, right into here on the side, a little bit up maybe, and a little bit into the sacral region. And the hip area you're talking about tends to be a little bit more of the upper glute. And so if I was going to put my hand on my hip right here, my thumb falls into the area right into here in the upper glute. Sometimes people feel it deep, deep within what they would deem as the piriformis muscle, while others will feel it start to almost wrap around like it's really sensitive right into here, and it actually drops down into the front of the hip right into this region. You may have been told that you have hip osteoarthritis. You may have been told that you have hip impingement, or that you have a strain of your hip flexor. Now, the stretches I'm going to cover today work really well for us in office when we've screened somebody really well, if we've gotten all the information we need out of their history and intake form, and we get an idea if these exercises are safe for them. To be fair, one person's medication is another one's poison. And so with that in mind, all of these should feel pretty good. If they don't feel good, don't do them. All exercises and stretches that we give people, generally they should feel pretty good. Now the first one we're going to start with here is a nice side stretch. In this case, my problem is going to be on the top side. Now, some of you may be able to do this without pillows. So I'm going to show you first without a pillow, and then I'll talk about where to put the pillow next. Now, essentially, I'm just going to lay in this position like I kind of fell asleep, all right? This is the basic starting position that you can tinker with, and many of you will fall into this position here. This is not the right position for this stretch, because if we're trying to stretch this side and open it up a little bit, we need to make sure this area is elongated like a rainbow, okay? And so I like to take people's shoulder and kind of tuck it underneath here and let their head fall if they don't have any neck pain. If you have neck pain, you can put a pillow there, and just reach and stretch out this top side here. Now, when I use the lat to stretch the side, it actually helps out a lot without having to tinker too much, okay? Now, some people need to tinker about where this back leg is a little bit. They might notice that they have to go long with it. They might have to go back a little bit further. Some people may have to just take their knee on their shin right here and then slightly drop it off. But generally right here, I feel the stretch that I feel is probably, if I had to rate it, like a 10 out of 10 being a really, really intense stretch and a 0 being nothing, this is probably close to a 3. Now, if I stuff the pillow underneath here, underneath like this spacing that I have, it doubles down on creating a little bit of stretch into the upper part too. Most people, I don't have them go above like a 5 out of 10 stretching feeling, and it certainly shouldn't reduplicate their hip or their low back pain. This is just a starting point to slowly open up the side. Most people feel like there's no problems whatsoever right here, and I usually have them hang in it for about a minute to 2 minutes. Okay, that's stretch number 1. Stretch number 2 is a mid-back stretch that helps out also decompress the lower back. And as long as we put the hip in a nice position that it tolerates, most people get a lot of benefit out of it. Now this one is one that I start most mornings with here. And I actually take it, and I bring my head on the ground, right into here. And I feel like my arms are doing a little bit of the stretching of the upper back right into this region here. Okay. Now, what I'll tend to do here is I'll tinker with where my knees are to make sure my hip, in the front of my hip, doesn't feel like it's really too painful. You can also take the feet and bring them together as well. Sometimes this position is a little bit too deep for people, and so I like to let them hang out here just a little bit. You're going to breathe into your kidneys. Okay, And that's step one. Step two in this one, we can double down with a little bit of mid-back mobilization, mainly because the mid-back, if it moves better, it makes it so the lower back can relax a little bit. All right, and then we'll double down a little bit of greasing up the hips in this one too. Apologize, I know my mic is going to get muffled, so hang in there with me. Okay, now in this position, it's going to sound really weird to do, but I'm going to imagine like I have 3 buttons in the front of my polo shirt, and I'm going to try to slowly push those buttons towards the floor. It may look like I'm not doing much, but every time I push those buttons to the floor, I feel like the area between my shoulder blades feel like it's working well, and it feels like it's being challenged in a good way. Doing about 10 reps or so is enough for that. Now, the next one we can do is we can take the elbows here and glue them down to the floor. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to sit back while not letting my elbows come unglued and return. This is a really nice way to grease up the hips, because sometimes people's hip pain and low back pain just comes out of that their hips don't really move a lot during the day. Sometimes greasing up the hips is helpful. We say motion is lotion and movement is medicine. Doing about 10 or so is usually enough, and this helps a little bit more of stretching of the upper back, and also when you glue the elbows to the floor, you're going to feel that it opens up the lower back quite a bit. You can double down on that and breathe into your kidneys, which helps out to stretch out the low back in a good way too. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is a really nice easy hip flexor stretch. And the way I had people do this with low back pain and groin pain is different than how I'd have someone do it with other types of problems. Okay. So I am aware my head's going to get cut off. It doesn't really matter this one anyways. Okay. So here, we're going to put the most dominant symptom side to the back, okay? Now, here I'm going to be like the thinker, okay? I'm going to actually lean probably about 10% of my body weight onto my front knee here. And then I'm going to take this front foot, and I'm just going to walk this guy out, kind of like if the Addams Family thing had a little brother and it was a foot. The foot is doing the creep-in, okay? And what this does is it puts me in a nice starting position where this back leg has a little bit of pre-stretch on it before I even start, okay? The rest of me is going to be encased in stone from here up. I don't need anything else to move, and I'm just going to rock my body weight towards my front foot. I'm going to rock it out, okay? The reason why this one is helpful, again, is it's greasing up the hip, and a lot of times people don't really have a lot of hip extension movement throughout their day unless they're doing things like sprinting and hiking and running, okay? There's very few things in life which allow hip hyperextension, and running and jumping is one of them. So as you've become more busy in your life and you don't do that quite as much, sometimes the lack of motion in the hip makes the low back and parts of the hip suffer. And so sometimes one of the easiest solutions to reduce pain is to stretch out the hip into some extension and then see how that settles. So these are 3 of the basic stretches and progressions that I like for hip and low back pain that feels like it's combined together. These are not the only things you should be doing, but they're a nice starting point for a lot of people. Typically what we end up doing, like a progression of things, is we find passive range of motion, and then we make an active range of motion, and then we put it through a little bit of a challenge, all right? We've done other videos on YouTube that show some of the challenging exercises we do, but usually done in this system helps out to make it so there's less fallout, less chance of aggravation when you're doing the actual challenging exercises, and it makes it more structured. And so we find that doing this methodology gets us really good results on things like low back pain, either it being from disc degeneration, from low back disc herniation or bulges, as well as hip impingement, sports hernias, and groin pains, and so on. So if you guys are looking for help, we'd love to help you. We're in Costa Mesa, California. We have virtuals and in-person services, and we've seen a lot of people for front of hip pain, as well as low back pain and piriformis syndrome and so on. We've seen them virtually and have very little problems because, as you can see on the video, it's very easy to observe people's movements. We need to see what you're doing, how you're doing things, and then make the suggestions appropriately. Now, we have a webinar in the corner as well, which is a free thing that we offer. It's curated information so that you guys get as much information as you can possibly find on the internet all in one spot in a very entertaining video, which is about 30 minutes long. It's the most useful 30 minutes that you'll spend researching what you have going on. So take advantage of that. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. We'll see you next time.